before I bring our keynote, Deroy Murdock up here, I want to take the baton from Gene and just remind you that you too can someday win an award like Elizabeth there for donating to the Rio Grande Foundation. And even if you are not approaching whatever lofty levels those may be, I encourage you to support our work, because without average people like you coming out to these events and supporting us financially with a tax-free donation, we could not exist. So without further ado, Deroy Murdock is one of the most prominent syndicated columnists in the country. He's a senior fellow with the Atlas Economic Research Foundation, an organization that supports or collaborates with some 300 free market think tanks in 100 countries worldwide, including the Rio Grande Foundation. Deroy's column, This Opinion Just In, reaches approximately 400 newspapers across America each week, including the New York Post, the Washington Times, the Boston Herald, San Francisco Examiner, but not the Albuquerque Journal, so maybe you could drop a line to the Albuquerque Journal and encourage them. He's a frequent guest on CNBC, CNN, C-SPAN, Fox News Channel, MSNBC, and if you didn't catch it, John Stossel had him on his show recently to discuss the concepts behind libertarianism. As a popular public speaker, Deroy Murdock has lectured or debated at the Cato Institute, Council on Foreign Relations, Harvard Medical School, Heritage Foundation, National Academy of Sciences, Dartmouth, Stanford, Tulane Universities, and various fora from Bogota to Buenos Aires to Budapest, and probably other places that don't begin with B. Deroy is a native of Los Angeles, go Lakers, I guess, a graduate of Georgetown University and a resident of New York City, where he earned an MBA from New York University. His MBA program included a semester at Chinese University of Hong Kong. Deroy's recent writings have included dozens of columns detailing the downside of rampant federal spending, drawbacks of the bailout culture, and the dangers of Obamacare. As Deroy likes to say, when will these people listen? Please help me welcome today's keynote speaker, Deroy Murdock.
Thank you very much for that very kind introduction and for the invitation to visit Albuquerque. This is my first time in your very nice city, which I've enjoyed. This is my second time in New Mexico. I was in Santa Fe for a wedding about 2002, so it's very nice to be back in the land of enchantment. I want to say thank you to your staff members, to Gene Law, who has done such great work here, and how lucky the Foundation of Economic Enterprise will be to have her services very soon. You can look forward to her great work. And I also want to say thank you to the winners of the Lights of Liberty Award. Thank you for your fine work, and encourage you to keep it up because we need it. I also want to take a moment just to recognize the fine work that Jim Scarantino has done here at the Rio Grande Foundation. He took a look at the amount of money that the Obama administration has spent and the kind of jobs it's created around the state, which I thought were kind of interesting. For example, he discovered that there are 25 jobs created in New Mexico's 22nd Congressional District, 15.8 in New Mexico's 35th Congressional District, and unfortunately there was an expenditure of $8 million, but 0 jobs created in New Mexico's 40th Congressional District. Now the only problem with this is that New Mexico only has 3 congressional districts. Jim took a look at recovery.org, which is the official website of the stimulus program, and it actually lists 13 different congressional districts in New Mexico. Very interesting calculation. He published this information on NewMexicoWatchdog.org, and the Rio Grande Foundation got in touch with other free market think tanks around the country, and they also discovered all sorts of phantom jobs in phantom congressional districts. And it basically turned out that a lot of these jobs that we thought were being created were, I guess, invented out of thin air or something like that. And it really became a national controversy, and something on which we were able to focus. The free market movement was able to focus some attention from coast to coast. So this is a great example of the kind of leadership of the Rio Grande Foundation, and I commend them for that fine work, and thank you guys for supporting them, and hope you will continue to do so. As I was flying out here, let me also just take a moment to thank all of you for being here today. I realize it's a Friday, the weekend, probably the only thing standing between you and the weekend right now. You've got personal commitments, business commitments, and all that, and yet here you are today sitting outdoors on a lovely sunny day focusing on public policy. So let me say thank you for being among the few, the proud, those who give a damn. I was flying out here yesterday from New York City, where I live, on United Airlines, and saw something in the Wall Street Journal I thought I'd share with you. It's a very cute story about President Obama, who was on one of his out-of-town trips. He came back to the White House, landed at Andrews Air Force Base, came back to the White House and landed on the White House lawn in Marine One, his big helicopter. And as he got off the helicopter, as he usually does, there's a Marine standing at the bottom of the chopper there ready to greet him as he steps off the ladder. And President Obama was coming off his chopper, and he had under each arm, he had what appeared to be a little baby pig. And so the Marine greeted him and said, "Excellent pigs, sir." And President Obama said, "Well, these actually aren't pigs. What they are is genuine Arkansas Razorback hogs. I got one for Hillary Clinton and one for Nancy Pelosi." And the Marine said, "Excellent trade, sir." Right in the Wall Street Journal. Amazing. Well, my remarks today are entitled "Free Enterprise in the Obama Era." But before we turn to the current occupant of the White House, let's focus a little bit on the man who I think was one of the finest presidents America has been fortunate enough to serve our country, Ronald Wilson Reagan. He said many, many wise things, but I think one of the wisest he said was the following: "Today, if you invent a better mousetrap, the government comes along with a better mouse." And Reagan essentially got it exactly right. As Reagan and his team understood, if you innovate, open a business, and hire people, these are good things which we ought to encourage and applaud. Alas, government reliably jumps in the way so often when people do exactly that. The folks in charge of the White House now see things very, very differently from this particular group of people who were around in the 1980s. Here's Team Obama. We're yucking it up, I believe, on Air Force One, having a great time there. And right in the middle, you see the man with the $1 trillion smile, Barack Obama. A man who started his career as a community organizer, succeeded there on the south side of Chicago, ran for state senate and won, ran for the U.S. Senate and won, then ran for President of the United States and won, and of course that's where he is now. Not a moment has this man spent in private business, in free enterprise, doesn't know a thing about that system whatsoever. Not the picture is Vice President Joe Biden, the man with the magic mouth. He was elected to the United States Senate at age 29, and if you're 29 years old, according to the Constitution, you're too young to be a U.S. Senator. And fortunately for him, he became age 30 about 6 weeks before he was sworn in, so it was barely legal to be a U.S. Senator when he was sworn in. And he served there until he became Vice President. Again, no one who's had any experience in the business economy or free enterprise. The other people around Obama and Biden, you've got Chicago political operatives, various political activists, campaign types. They don't have any business experience, far-left activists. And what you see in common with these people who are in the administration, in the White House and elsewhere, is just very little understanding of how growth is created, how wealth is created, and how jobs are created. They may have some academic ideas, but no actual hands-on experience, as you'll see here. Forbes took a look at the cabinet appointments from Teddy Roosevelt onward. And what you generally find is in Democratic administrations, people who have private sector business experience, usually about 30 to 40% of the cabinet. With Republicans, it's about 50 to 60%. It's about mid-50s under Reagan and almost 60 under Eisenhower. And you go all the way to the side here with Obama, and you find about 8% of the cabinet having some sort of private sector business experience. So this is really kind of an alien world for all of them. As The Economist magazine accurately observed, Team Obama is hostile to business in almost every way imaginable. Now just meditate for a moment on these amazing comments from the White House's so-called Payzar, Kenneth Feinberg. He was on Neil Cavuto's show on Fox Business Channel February 4th, and Neil Cavuto asked him, "Do you ever have a figure in your mind of what connotes excessive compensation? Is it $1 million? Is it $2 million? And here's what Kenneth Feinberg said, quote, "Nobody should receive more than a base cash salary of $500,000 maximum," unquote. Now there may be exceptions in certain cases, but that is sort of the figure that is the benchmark, said the White House Payzar. Now I think it's truly staggering that someone of Kenneth Feinberg's influence who works for us even would presume to determine what a CEO ought to be paid. Unfortunately, you find the same command and control attitude rampant throughout the Democratic Congress. With Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Harry Reid, and Nancy Pelosi, basically what you've got collectively is the four horse persons of the apocalypse. Time and time again, their solution to almost any problem we have in the country, is to expand government and get it more deeply involved in our lives at greater expense. And again, I think the economists caught it captured it all very well in this recent cover. In many ways, these folks are inflicting huge damage to America's free enterprise system and attempting plenty more. You'll see this in terms of taxes, healthcare reform, cap and trade or cap and tax regulations against so-called global warming, federal spending, and an overall reduction in economic freedom. I'd like to touch on each of those elements briefly. Here you've got the beleaguered American taxpayer. And unfortunately, the people in control in Washington, D.C. seem as if they've never met a tax hike they didn't love. 2010, this year, started with 73 tax increases that went into effect on January 1st. Essentially what you had is Bush-era tax cuts that expired, the old rates kicked in, and the tax reductions disappeared. Congress did not renew many of those taxes, and so the old taxes kicked back in. The casualties included a 50% partial expensing for business asset purchases. That was worth $5.1 billion. There's a research and experimentation tax credit that vanished. That was worth $7 billion. Something that probably affects many of you in this room. A patch to keep many families from paying the alternative minimum tax. That was worth $63 billion. That's disappeared. 70 more tax increases on January 1st that we're all enduring at the moment. Grand total between $100 and $150 billion. That's what it'll be, $100 or $250 billion. At the same time, America has the developed world's highest corporate tax at 35%. We've stayed at 35% since 1999 or before, and at the same time you see the major industrial powers around the world cut their corporate taxes down to 24.2%. And as we've stayed there and they've dropped it, we've become less competitive, they've become more so. Team Obama, as far as I can gather, has absolutely no plan to cut this tax, even though it hammers America's international competitiveness and scares off such big companies as Accenture, Ingersoll Rand, Tyco International, and others who have moved their domiciles out of the United States to places like Switzerland and Ireland, which have much more favorable tax regimes. So they're really almost like reverse Mayflower. They're getting up out of here and sailing back to Europe, which is extraordinary. Now, let's talk a bit about healthcare reform. Well, Obamacare is the law of the land, and this legislation drones on and on for 2,562 pages. That literally, and I checked this on Amazon, that literally is almost double the length of the Vintage Classics edition of Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace. But rather than Russian tragedy, what we have instead is something far more grave, which is dense, baffling legalese. For example, this is just one particular provision, which is on page 381, payments to skilled nursing facilities. And this is an adjustment in the recalibration factor. Based on the initial analysis under paragraph 1, the Secretary shall adjust the case mix indexes under section 1888E 4GI of the Social Security Act 42 U.S. Code 139YYE4GI for fiscal year 2010 by the appropriate recalibration factor as proposed in the proposed rule for Medicare skilled nursing facilities by such Secretary on May 12, 2009, 74 Federal Register 2214 et sec, unquote. Anybody here have any idea what that means? No one in Washington does either, so you're in good company. The House Republicans took a look at the original Nancy Pelosi bill to see how all these things fit together, a piece of legislation like that. And here's what they came up with. Nice little org chart. This looks like something you might find if you were to open up an Intel microchip and look at all the circuitry in an integrated circuit. So this is basically the integrated circuit of Obamacare, under which we're all living at the moment. And this new law is horrible in many ways, not least including for business. It includes a $2.5 trillion price tag just in its first 10 years of operation, and the costs continue after that. There are fines for companies that do not insure their employees adequately. For example, if any of you here have a company with 50 employees, and let's say that you have only one employee, just one, who's eligible for subsidies, a fine kicks in right away, and that fine is a $2,000 fine. Now here's the amazing part. The fine does not apply just to that one eligible worker. It applies to your entire workforce of 50 people. So instead of writing a check for $2,000, you've got to write one for $100,000 each year in terms of fines on your entire workforce, not just the one person eligible for subsidies. Let's talk a little bit about the medical device industry. There's a group called AdvaMed, which is the trade association for the medical device industry. And they report that 70% of medical device manufacturers have fewer than 100 employees and make less than $100 million. Now these innovative companies make such products as hard stents, such as the one Bill Clinton got put in his chest a few months ago, artificial limbs, such as those that people who come back from serving in Iraq and Afghanistan have put on when they lose limbs overseas, and insulin pumps, which make life easier for diabetics who can have the insulin drip in very, very slowly all day long rather than having to inject themselves every few hours. Now, what thanks do these companies get for producing this life-enhancing, life-saving technology? A brand new tax. $20 billion over 10 years. That comes out to $2 billion per year, or roughly $5,500 per employee in that industry per year. Now, I call this the pacemaker tax, and it equals about 1/5 of the industry's research and development budget, and just over half of the venture capital the medical device industry raised in 2007. So it's a very, very significant hit on this industry. What does all this taxation mean for innovation in medical devices? Nothing good at all. Just take a look at the financial charges that America's largest corporations already have taken against anticipated losses due to Obamacare. The tax deductions that they receive for providing drug benefits to their retirees will become non-deductible under Obamacare. Here you can see the impact this will have on their bottom lines. You've got AT&T declared a charge of $1 billion, Verizon $970 million, John Deere and Company $150 million, so on and so forth. It comes down to $2.8 billion in losses that have kicked in just since Obamacare got signed, and nobody's enjoyed any benefits from this thing yet. Now what you see here is a picture that I snapped last night outside a cigar bar. Actually, this leads to our next issue, which is cap and trade, or cap and tax, as a lot of people call it more accurately. The cap and tax bill didn't fool Congressman John Dingell, the veteran liberal Democrat from Michigan. And as he said, I quote, "Nobody in this country realizes that cap and trade is a tax, a great big one," unquote. How big, you ask? Between 2010 and 2019, $846 billion. 846 billion with a B. And that's all to fight carbon dioxide, which I'm emitting right now. Nonetheless, the EPA recently declared carbon dioxide a pollutant, and the Obama administration will use this ruling to engage in endless regulatory mischief, much of which will burden or break small to medium-sized companies and hurt large ones as well. If Team Obama does one thing with gusto, it's spending money. Unfortunately, it simply have accelerated the massive expenditures that we saw in Washington under the Bush-Rove administration. Chris Edwards of the Cato Institute took a look at the spending from Eisenhower onward. He found something very interesting, which is that President George W. Bush was the biggest spender since Lyndon Baines Johnson. George W. Bush hiked the federal budget 83% in nominal terms over 8 years. And Team Obama is taking this dubious distinction to even more notorious heights. You can see right here, the spending has started in 1970, up 242%. From 2008, this is even before Obama showed up. And you can see median household income over that period is only gone up 29%. I think this one chart very vividly shows you what is wrong in this country at the moment. Just consider a few of the major spending items, major initiatives that the Obama administration has supported in recent months. The President signed a $447 billion omnibus spending bill, which spanned about 2,400 pages. That featured over 5,200 pork barrel projects, which he said he would abandon, but the pork barrel keeps coming. This is worth $3.9 billion, that one bill alone. One item in there I found interesting was $700,000 expenditure for shrimp industry fishing effort research continuation in Silver Spring, Maryland. You guys all got to pay for that. Don't you feel lucky? Even worse, while inflation is just 1.8% at the moment, this bill hikes federal spending by 12%, which is roughly inflation times almost 7. The U.S. Treasury announced blank checks for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac for the next 3 years. If they need money, they'll go to the Treasury. They'll say how much do you need, whatever they want. They get a check for that amount. Wouldn't that be nice to have your bank do that for you? Estimated cost on that, perhaps $400 billion. President Obama introduced a budget this spring that spends $3.8 trillion this year. That's up 8.6% over last year's budget, and this includes a one-year budget deficit of $1.6 trillion. And over the next 10 years, such deficits alone total $8.5 trillion. That's 8.5 trillion with a T. Speaking of trillions, consider the deficit projections for the decade ahead. Let's take a look at this. If this makes tears run down your cheeks, then we'll match those you see in red on this chart, which is basically deficit spending from now all the way to 2019, over $1 trillion every single year practically. This brings to mind the words of the late President Herbert Hoover, who put it very well: "Blessed are the young, for they shall inherit the national debt." Absolutely amazing situation. Now, all of this terrible situation has torpedoed American economic freedom, and the Heritage Foundation has done a very good job of tracking this on a year-by-year basis. They put out something called the Index of Economic Freedom each year in conjunction with the Wall Street Journal, and they basically look at about 180 countries around the world and try to determine whether they're, through their spending, their taxation, regulations, rule of law, what have you, whether they're more free, less free, and so on and so forth. And they found some very interesting results this year. They looked at the top 10 countries around the world, and you've got number 1, Hong Kong, followed by Singapore, Australia, New Zealand, Iceland, Switzerland, Canada, and the United States is number 8. So in terms of economic freedom, if this were an Olympic event, we would get the bronze medal. Also notice that you've got bright green up to number 7, and then the United States is in light green. The reason for that is that bright green countries are called free market economies. The light green countries are called mostly free economies. So folks, we have fallen off the list of free economies. We're now on the list of mostly free economies. This happened this year. So we're no longer leading the pack or even the back of the pack of free market economies. We're now among the mostly free economies. We're number 8, as you see. We got a score below 80, which is the cutoff, so we're now in the mostly free category. And essentially, you saw us deteriorate in a number of areas from 2009 to 2010. Our government spending was very high. That caused us to lose points. Monetary freedom with the Federal Reserve, getting to all sorts of areas beyond just maintaining the stability of the currency, but getting to all sorts of other areas. They were marked down for that. Financial freedom, having the United States government. All of us here own GM, Chrysler, AIG, the world's largest insurance company, now that we all own that collectively in this big kibbutz of ours. We lost points for that. And then in terms of property rights, which ties in also to the rule of law, when the secured creditors of the car companies were told, well, we owe you money, but why don't you get out of the way? We're not going to pay you. We're going to pay first the United Auto Workers, our friends who give money to our campaigns. Well, they get the money before you do, so step aside while we help our pals out. That was an incredible abrogation of both property rights and the rule of law. We lost points for that, and that's one of the reasons we dropped from a free country to a mostly free country. Now, why is this important? Greater economic freedom equals a higher standard of living. What you basically find is in free countries versus less free countries, people have more money to do with which whatever they please, take care of themselves, take care of their loved ones, attend to their health, their leisure, what have you. And the differences are huge. Among free countries, we're talking about 28,000 annual income or per capita GDP. Mostly free countries category where we are, 23,000. And then you get over to depressed countries like Cuba and North Korea, we're talking $1,700 a year, $1,800 a year, that sort of thing. So you want to be on that side among the free countries, not the less free countries. If you're into the promotion of a clean environment, this also is very good. You find that wealthier countries have the money to dedicate to having cleaner air, cleaner water, cleaner habitat. The poorer countries, people just worry about what are we going to eat tonight, and so they have less time to worry about nature. And so if you're concerned about the environment, you want to be among the free countries, not the less free countries. Now, as we get to the issue of the environment, let me touch on the ongoing and unfolding disaster on the Gulf Coast, because I think that's a very important issue that ties into a lot of what we're talking about today. This is the scene April 20th of this year when the Deepwater Horizon caught fire and was burning. Of course, it fell apart and sank, and the oil gusher began. See today. Anybody know what that is? This is the state flag of Louisiana. It's a Louisiana state flag with a beautiful pelican there. Union Justice and Confidence being their state motto. And here, unfortunately, is how things look for pelicans on the Gulf Coast today. And there's a very, very jarring image, a very sad image, and one that has brought tears to my eyes as someone who's been in New Orleans 21 times. Loves that place very much. And I think those people who favor big government are going to use imagery like this to attack those of us who believe in limited government, less regulation, and so on. And I think it'll be very difficult to respond when you see this sort of thing going on now, and probably continuing on into August, and who knows if it's going to get any better or worse between now. It'll be very tough for free marketeers like us to respond to this sort of thing. I would say a few things in response to things like this, which is, if you want more government, ask yourselves the question, what do you think of the government's response so far? By all measures, left, middle, and right, people say it's been inadequate, it's been discoordinated, it's been confused, and it's not been very effective. Also, demanding greater safety among oil drillers and other people is one thing. Having regulations towards safety is probably something sensible. It's quite another to see what we saw coming out of the Oval Office on Tuesday night when President Obama said to the nation, and I quote, "I will meet with the chairman of BP and inform him that he is to set aside whatever resources are required to compensate the workers and business owners who've been harmed as a result of this company's recklessness, unquote. I'm really amazed at this idea of the President of the United States informing an executive that he has to pay any amount of money for anything. Now, we have legislation which Congress can pass to make a company do something. We can have the Department of Justice take them to court, and they can defend themselves in court if they wish. The company certainly can get up and volunteer to do whatever it wishes, but having the President say, I'm going to inform him he must hand over $20 billion, I think takes us into the realm of Hugo Chavez. I think this is truly astonishing. I also think it may be time for us, looking at this unfolding catastrophe, to ask the question, should we perhaps de-emphasize offshore oil drilling and instead emphasize onshore oil drilling and offshore natural gas drilling? And I'll show you some figures on why that may make some sense. We have a lot more offshore oil than we have onshore oil. We've got, looks like a year's supply of onshore oil of 11.78 billion, and I think these numbers are actually reversed, I'm afraid, but there's a lot more offshore oil than there is onshore oil. Our natural gas is much bigger onshore than off, and of course if you drill onshore, the whole point is that if you have an accident, it's a lot easier to clean up an accident at the surface level than 5,000 feet under the water with all the difficulties that we run into. So I think that it would be a lot easier to avoid the problem offshore if we could drill onshore, which is something very good for your state. New Mexico happens to be very much involved, a lot more than I thought, realized, in oil and gas. This is one of your biggest industries, your biggest civilian employer. In 2007, New Mexico pumped $65.4 billion of crude oil and drilled 1,200 new wells in your state alone. And this has been quite a cash cow. In 2007, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, New Mexico earned $843 million in tax revenues from the oil and gas industry. And in fact, New Mexico is ranked 4th in the U.S. by this measure. Number 1 is Alaska. That's not a big surprise. I thought Texas would be higher. In fact, Texas is number 9. So I guess this proves that New Mexico can mess with Texas. So congratulations on that. So I think a greater emphasis on onshore drilling for natural gas and oil, and drilling offshore for natural gas, where if it spills, goes straight in the air, it doesn't wash in the marshes and kill birds. Maybe that's an approach we ought to consider taking. I want to talk about basically how we get out of this mess in which we find ourselves. I think basically what we need to do, in addition to capping the oil well and cleaning up the messes created, I think restoring America's economic liberty should be this country's first order of business. We need to end the overall tone of hostility towards business that we're seeing, much more than I think we've seen in any previous administration. I think we need to cut taxes and introduce tax incentives, rather than a few small, narrowly tailored tax proposals such as we've seen President Obama put forward. What we need is widespread, permanent tax rate reduction, so people have strong incentives to work, save, invest, and produce. We really don't have that at the moment. One idea I have is the Tax-Free Patent Act. It certainly could be done in the state on a state basis. I think it ought to be done nationwide, which is if you have a new idea, you get it patented, you get your patent certificate, and with it you also receive the permission to make as many of those as you want, manufacture as many as you wish, market them around the world, hire as many people as you wish to do so, and you can enjoy the benefits from that patent tax-free, free of corporate tax for 10 years. I think you'll see people pouring into this country to come up with inventions, patent them here, manufacture them, and market them here, and sell them in the U.S. and overseas. If they know that they can take the 35% corporate tax and just eliminate that from their spreadsheets, you'll see job creation explode. I think you'll see all kinds of new products and services come along we've never imagined, and that'd be a very, very good thing. We need to kill the death tax. It's now 0% this year. It's going to shoot back up to 55%. And Harry Reid just said the other day that what he wants is a 55% estate tax on estates of $1 million or above. He doesn't feel like compromising beyond that. And basically, if you have a lot of money and you're older and you want your loved ones to get that money, you got between now and December 31 to think about that. There was actually an article in the Wall Street Journal, a very, very scary article, January 3, 4, 5, very early in the year, about families, wealthy families of people with a lot of money who were in their 80s, 90s, what have you, who are sitting down with their kids and grandkids and saying, well, you know, what do you want me to do? And the fact that this Congress and Washington, D.C. and our political overlords have put families in a situation where they even have to consider talking about this sort of thing is truly chilling and terrifying. I think we need to eliminate the corporate tax, or at least lower it to the OECD average of 24%, so we can be at least competitive with our European partners around the world. And we need to stop the massive federal borrowing and spending. It crowds out private capital as Uncle Sam raids the debt markets. It's a little hard to get a loan when you go to the bank if Uncle Sam is there at the loan window taking the money that you want to expand your business or start your new enterprise. Spending also creates huge distortions. Uncle Sam does very, very little in terms of giving money without having strings attached. Again, Ronald Reagan put it very well. He said, if you get into bed with government, don't be surprised if you don't get a good night's sleep. As I said earlier, the budget is growing 8.6% annually amid 1% inflation. So when it comes to spending our money, my simple advice to the Obama administration is this: don't do something, just stand there. Thank you very much.
I don't see a mic down here, but just if you can come down and introduce yourself and ask your question, and then Deroy will answer.
While this gentleman's doing so, I found these glasses up here. These jeans?
They're mine.
They're yours?
Yeah.
They're right here. Nice to see you. Hello, sir.
Deroy, thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me here.
My name is Mike Freeze, and I wonder if you'd address for us in just a minute the relative importance of spending versus taxation.
The relative importance of spending versus taxation. I think Milton Friedman put it very well. He said ultimately the measure of the size and scope and ultimately danger of government is spending. Because essentially with spending, you're either going to tax people now or in the future. If you're taxing them now, you collect the money and go spend it immediately, or you get yourself in a big spending situation and you borrow the money, and then you've got to go raise taxes in order to pay the money off eventually. So taxes are not good, but I think the real way to address this is to stop the spending and the spending under control. I think one thing free marketeers ought to demand of every candidate is, look, first of all, you've got to cut spending, because spending is, government is too deeply involved in our lives to begin with. But even if you can't do that, can't we all agree that we will keep spending capped at inflation, or inflation plus the growth of population? And if you could do that, you can maintain a safety net if that's what you want. You can handle people coming in or being born in our society without doing what we're doing now, which is inflation times 4, 5, 6%. And this is something, unfortunately, the Bush administration did. Bush was spending at inflation times 4, roughly. And if he had maintained the spending level at inflation plus population, I believe the federal budget would be about $600 billion smaller than it is today. So this is a bipartisan problem, and I think spending is a huge problem. And the least we ought to say is, okay, inflation plus population growth or less. And beyond that, I think we should demand all sorts of reductions in areas in which the government shouldn't be involved, where it is involved inefficiently, or where you see in so many areas just total duplication. You've got the same program in this department, that agency, that board and commission. Why not consolidate it so if the government is involved, at least it's just focusing on it in one place? Other questions?
Hi, Deroy. You could talk a little bit more about the patent legislation you talked about, you just touched on, and you said that states could possibly take a look at that. How would a state like New Mexico be able to do that?
Sure. Yeah, I call it the Patent-Free Tax Act. This is my idea. I've not seen anybody else push this. And the basic concept is you want to encourage as much innovation as you can. And on the federal level, what we do is say, look, for 10 years you don't have to pay any corporate tax. Don't even fill out paperwork. We don't want to see any papers. Just knock yourselves out, make as many of these things, and make us proud. Make us as proud of you as we are proud of Thomas Edison for giving us the light bulb. In terms of the state basis, what you could do is say the same thing. We don't care what Washington, D.C. does, but if you patent a device and you open your plant, or you continue to sell that patented device in New Mexico, if you're a New Mexico-based entrepreneur, you don't have to pay any New Mexico corporate tax. I don't know what your state corporate tax is, but you can forgive them the state corporate tax, and then let DC do whatever DC wants. But here in New Mexico, the people in Santa Fe can say, all right, if you do it in New Mexico, knock yourselves out. You don't have to pay any corporate tax. And I think you will see an explosion in innovation. You'll see your tech sector here expand, and all sorts of sectors we haven't even imagined. And the beauty of this, by the way, just to get into the weeds a little bit, the beauty of this from a revenue standpoint is it doesn't cost the government any money. There is no line in the budget that says, let's say you invent the skyhook finally, something I wish we have. We just have a little hook and something goes up in the sky and stays there when you need it later. You do like this and it comes right back down. No one's invented that yet, which would be a great invention if we had it. So let's say somebody invents the skyhook. There is no line in the budget that says revenue accruing from sales of the skyhook. The government's not expecting that money because it's not been invented yet. So this doesn't take any money out of the treasury that's supposed to be there, or the state treasury. This would be money that would be coming in from something not yet invented, so it's not yet been budgeted. So this doesn't advance or increase the state deficit at all. And then again, in year 11, the protection goes away, and then they've got to fill out their paperwork and pay their taxes. And in the meantime, they've come up with a new invention to make our lives better and more enjoyable. They've hired people to go make and manufacture and sell these devices, and they make money, which they then put back into the regular income tax, which they continue paying, private charities, supporting a Little League, what have you, and that's all good stuff. Sir?
Do you understand how the individual mandate in Obamacare will be enforced? I understand in the final version they denied to the IRS its usual tools of levies and crimes and asset seizures. So if there's no mechanism to really enforce it, if I understand it correctly, how will it be enforced? And if there's no compliance, what happens to this whole structure that is based on the individual mandate?
That's a very interesting question. There is no real enforcement mechanism. Presumably, you've got to pay some sort of a fine. I think what they might do is say, they may change the 1040 forms. You've got to attach your statement or your certificate of insurance where you've been insured. If you're not insured, you might have to pay a fine. What they figure is for a lot of people, it'll be cheaper just to pay the fine rather than go get a policy. And with something called must issue, which is part of or guaranteed issue, it's called guaranteed issue, which is part of Obamacare, you can walk in with your arm falling off and bleeding, or say, look, I've got an ulcer this big in my stomach. I want health insurance. And say, all right, here you go. Here's your plan. So just pay your little fine, and then when you get really sick, then get insurance. And this is kind of like that old story of the guy who walks into his insurance agent's office and says, hey Joe, I want to talk to you about fire insurance plan. And the guy says, well, I'm kind of busy. Can you come back after lunch? He goes, no, I need to talk to you right now. He says, well, what's the hurry? Well, my house is on fire. Same situation. People are going to wait until they get really sick and then get insurance, and so you're not going to have all those years where people are healthy, where they're putting in money to spread the risk around, the sick people's risk across that of people who are healthy. And you're going to find actuarially a lot of these insurance companies are going to go upside down, and it's going to be a very bad thing. So I think the enforcement is an interesting issue. There's a constitutional aspect to that gets really complicated that I can't remember in detail, but that I think opens it up to some challenges in terms of bringing forward the Supreme Court and maybe not knocking it out on a constitutional basis. And if the individual mandate is taken out of Obama, it's kind of like going up to your car, opening the hood, yanking out the engine. You have a lovely car, but it ain't going anywhere. And at that point, these folks may have to do something smart, such as repeal it, which is what they're going to do. Sir?
Yes, I'd like to hear your comment and opinion on the unfunded encumbrances, which with Pete Peterson and like-minded people feel exceeds $100 trillion.
The unfunded liabilities? Unfunded liabilities? The federal government's unfunded liabilities?
Yes.
The issue? Yeah, this is a huge problem. It's a massive problem. And that is, if you add up the Social Security trust funds obligations, the Medicare obligations, the amount of money that state governments owe, and the existing national federal debt, you add all that together, and it comes out to about $130 billion. In fact, the cover story of National Review this month.
Trillion.
Did I say billion? I'm sorry, I apologize. I was off by a factor of 1,000. I meant trillion, I said 130 trillion. I wish it were 130 billion. We could handle that. 130 trillion with a T. Thanks for the correction. Yeah, it's 1,000 times worse than I just indicated. $130 trillion, correct. And that is the amount of money that we owe in total in terms of unfunded liabilities. The cover story on National Review, this current issue, is on that exact topic. So if you want to learn more, pick up a great piece by Kevin Williamson on all of this. And I think to me, there are a couple of issues. One is that these, fortunately, are basically political obligations. They're not actual bills that we owe per se. So at some point, if we have politicians who will stand up and be courageous and say, look, we can't pay this stuff off. So if you're not collecting Social Security now, particularly if you're a younger person, you're not going to get the stuff we promised you. Maybe you'll get less, but you're not going to get 100 cents on the dollar. And you can start ratcheting that amount of money down, which you should. If you're a government employee and you're getting some sort of pension after 20 years of service, in New York City we've got people who've done 20 years working for the fire department, police department, and they retire at age 40 or 42, start brand new careers, and what they do is they get paid a percentage of a share of their last 3 years on duty. What they do is work tremendous overtime the last 3 years. They jack up that average, and their pension is based on that service, not the entire 20-year career. And you've got people making $150,000, $175,000 in pension money, and they start new careers and they go do something else and collect money there. That would be nice in the Wizard of Oz or some fantasy land or Alice in Wonderland, but we just can't afford this money. So I think that needs to be ratcheted back. And to me, the ultimate question is, if it comes to the point where we're like Greece and we can't pay these bills, we really have a couple options. One is to inflate our currency the way Zimbabwe did. You see how that worked out for them. Or we can default, like Argentina, and just say, look, I'm really glad you Chinese people loaned us this money, but we can't pay it off. So, enjoy the paper. They're all suitable for framing. You can put those up on your walls and say, look, I own a piece of American debt, but we're just not going to pay this off, so good luck with that. And those are two very, very negative and nasty options. Much better than that would be to start paring back these political obligations and tell people, look, we made too many promises, we can't pay them off. And then you also need a thriving, expanding, dynamic, growing economy so you have more actual wealth so that you can address these things. If you've got all these obligations in a shrinking economy, you're in the worst bit of hurt you can imagine. Anybody else?
Just personally, were you like a math guy in high school? When did you get into economics? As a fascination.
That's I've never been asked that question. That's very funny. I've never been accused of being a math guy. I needed 4 semesters to get through Algebra 1.
Oh.
I did very, very bad. I did much better at geometry, but no, I was just awful at that. So most of what I'm doing here is not heavy level math. It's just basically economics and basically looking at fiscal things. I've done this as a journalist. I have an MBA and did study economics, but a lot of this stuff, I've got my calculator out and using Excel spreadsheets to come up with this sort of thing. So really, it's sort of macroeconomics. But as far as the hard math, I always tell my friends, we go out to restaurants and here's what I think everybody owes me. Feel free to check my math. Trust but verify. Another Ronald Reagan quote.
I would like to add one thought to your comments about what's happening down in the Gulf. And I got this idea from some colleagues. But the group of people in this country who should be mostly responsible for that are the hardcore environmentalists. They kept it from drilling. Well, as you said, well, it could be done safely. They're the ones that forced that, and yet they are skating through all of this, saying, look what you all did. And I noticed you did not mention that, but I think they should get their credit for having caused the problem.
Sir, that's an excellent point you just made. And the French free market economist, the late Frederick Bastiat, used to talk about the things seen and unseen. The things we see are this horrible situation. We see it, turn on the TV, you'll see that all day long. The things you don't see are the people responsible. You're absolutely correct. Among those responsible, BP, most immediately responsible, but BP would not be out there in 5,000 feet of water if they were able to drill on the land in Alaska, on the land in New Mexico, on the land in North Dakota, taking natural gas out of the Marcellus shale deposits, for example. And were that the case, you wouldn't need to run out to the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. So you're right, the environmentalists have escaped all responsibility for this, and they do need to take a significant share of the responsibility for this, and you're absolutely right. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Deroy. And Gene is going to come up here for our raffle. Hopefully everyone who gave us some raffle money is stuck around for potentially winning one of our prizes.
Kelly, are you in here? Will you come up and help with this? Paige and I have sat out at that front table many times, and I don't remember Paul ever referring to us as lovely ladies who took your money. However, here is our new lovely lady. And Kelly, will you draw from these numbers, and we're going to get these out real quick. Frank, where are you? You won the Christmas ornament. Yes, you. Carrie Boyd. Carrie? Luann Hunt. We're going to say those are original signatures. Trust but verify.
This is all from the Reagan Library.
Charlie Sparks. And Charlie won the book. Doing my duty for the last time for the Rio Grande Foundation, each one of you had one of these on your chairs. This is our donation card. Every dollar that you give us really does make a difference. Many of you have joined the 9 Club, that $9 a month donation, and we actually have pins for all of you now, so you'll be receiving those. But that makes a huge difference. to us. Don't ever think that a $20 check won't be appreciated. Paul and I get very excited at every check that comes in. So if you are feeling generous today and would like to support Lights of Liberty in particular, but mostly the Rio Grande Foundation and the others that are being made in this state, please fill this out. Leave a check today, find one of us, or mail it in. Thank you so much for your support.
So thank you all for coming. Deroy will be happy to chat further out in the lobby. We'll also be showing the video presentation of each of the 3 award winners. Appreciate you all turning out on a Friday afternoon this summer, and thank you all. So take care.